You are now listening to the Someone's Favorite Productions podcast network.
Well, y'all, this is a really exciting day for me because I've known of Scooter McCrae for a long time. I've seen Shatter Dead previously, but in preparing for this, I got to see all of Scooter's films, and he's quickly becoming one of my favorite movie makers. And I'm not saying that because he's right in front of me. I cannot wait for this discussion today. I'm joined by movie maker, writer, director, creative spirit, Scooter McCrae. Scooter, thanks so much for making time for this.
Thank you very much, Chris. I'm looking forward to talking to you. I think we're gonna have a lot of fun here, and thank you so much for having
Yeah,
me.
of course, of course. I, there's just something I want to say kind of right at the top, and then we can go into the traditional kind of interview thing. But thank you for being willing to really push through taboo, push through social mores, push through topics that people don't want to talk about and bring intelligent and like nuanced thinking into making movies. I just thank you for doing that.
I I don't know what to say except thank you for saying that, and also for finding value in the movies because not everyone does. I can assure you, based on reviews that I've received over the last 30 something years.
Hmm.
But I am always trying my best. I'm always trying to do the best work that I can, and hopefully it leads to something worthwhile. It's always hard to judge your own stuff.
There's a perception that I had, let's call it 7 or 8 years ago, around what SOV was when I didn't have a lot of exposure to it. My exposure to SOV was Takashi Miike, and obviously I love his stuff.
Yeah,
And maybe a little bit here and there, like I think Lars von Trier shot something on video, and
yeah.
people would experiment with it, right? But it wasn't like a huge part of my vocabulary. And in the last several years, as I've dug into more and more, I've found there's a lot of creativity in it. That's one of the reasons there's a separate podcast I run called Punk Vacation, just looking at Vinegar Syndrome. And for that, I talk about unfettered creativity because I feel like in the SOV world, you don't have any constraints. And so you're able to just make the thing you want to make, right? But I have not found somebody who loves to shoot on video that I feel like if they had made their career coming up through the studio system, they would be compared with Shinya Tsukamoto, Takashi Miike, these really like these filmmakers, maybe even to some extent, who's the guy that's Happiness just came out, and storytelling,
Yes.
Salon. But there's a group of filmmakers that I think are willing to say, topic aside, I'm going to use whatever's on my mind to make a compelling story and to challenge the audience. And I think you're up there. After seeing your films, you're up there in that group. And I just want to say that at the top because I really, really, truly loved watching these movies.
Again, I thank you. It's humbling. It's wow. Thank you.
Yeah.
Some pretty amazing people you brought up there.
It's just so difficult to find people that are willing to not be feel okay as an audience member because I really don't know what it's like on the other side of the camera. But as an audience member, it's so difficult to find people that don't feel encumbered by a need to sell up the product or a need to sell the content or a need to figure out what's too far, what's gonna like that it really does feel to me very rare to find someone that's willing to just sit down and like stick to their vision and push it out. Am I is my perception of your process true or are the films you made the movies you made, excuse me, um would you feel like they're your vision and fairly uninterrupted?
Yeah, I mean, my feeling is every single one of them screams commercial, which is why I get someone who wants to give me money once every 20 years. I think the movies speak for themselves when it comes to what my idea of what is a commercial movie or what's going to be a big hit, and then producers somehow get tricked into, well, maybe this time he's right. Let's see what happens, and then oh well. So it's been a long 30, a long hard 30 years, let me tell you.
Well, going back to that, so 30 years ago, um, was when Shatter Dead was made. Is that where you're going back to? Is that 30 years
Yeah, I'm
old?
going, yeah, because it technically, I guess it came out in 94. He
So
shot it in 92, came out in 94, yeah.
okay. So walk us through a little bit. Like what I definitely want to get into the movie, but just who was Scooter McCrae before Shatter Dead and kind of what gave you that idea and like how'd you get into making movies?
I mean, before that, for me, I went to film school. I went
Hmm.
to, it's called SUNY Purchase, State University of New York at Purchase. And that was a film conservatory program. I was very lucky to get in. It was the kind of place that when I was there, I think they interviewed like somewhere between 200, 300 people a year, and then they would choose 20 people at most from that group, bring them in. It was really like, getting, a personal uh, upbringing, from working with these classes that were sometimes only 10 students, sometimes a little larger, sometimes a little smaller even. And at that point in 1984 to 88, which is when I was going there, we were still shooting on film. So shooting on Super 8, on 16 millimeter. In fact, while I was there, I, discovered there was a VHS camcorder and I started shooting on that as well. I was like, yeah, video, this is interesting. I can really shoot a lot more. So, it was almost a kind of foreshadowing as what to come because I remember other students going like, what are you shooting with that garbage? I'm like, I don't know. There's something here.
Hmm.
Um, but what got me into film school, the three, so here I'm telling you, like I'm at this, hoity-toity program, but it's SUNY Purchase, so it's affordable. It was a state university school, so it wasn't like I was going to NYU.
Hmm.
At the time, I think NYU was about 20 or 25,000 a year, which I'm sure people now would laugh and go like, "Oh, that's a drop in the bucket." But when I was going to SUNY Purchase, I believe it was about some between 3 or 4,000. It's definitely not
Wow.
more than 5K a year, and I think it was
Wow.
only 3.5.
Amazing.
Um, so it was like, well, I can go to NYU for 1 year, I can do 4 years at this school, and then maybe even make a movie along the way.
Uh-huh, uh-huh.
So that seemed like the smarter way to go. And I got in on three movies. I was the question was, what are the three movies that changed your life and made you want to make movies? And I said, oh, very clearly. The first one and the most important was the original Star Wars.
Okay.
The second one was Seven Samurai.
Nice.
And third, Dawn of the Dead.
Okay.
So somehow sitting there with these people that are listening to me go on and on about these three movies, they were like, okay, I guess we'll take him and see what happens. 'Cause I know from talking to a lot of other people there that some people, those were not three movies most people walking into that school had with them.
What would have been in 1984, what would have been the best answer? Would it have been like a new Hollywood kind of movie, like a conversation or
No, I think at that school, there was a real push for, and I mean this in a non-pretentious way, but there was a real push for auteurism. You
okay.
were there and you wrote and you directed,
Okay.
and as you learned the technical skills. So what they were turning out there was not technicians in the traditional sense. They wanted to export full-scale artists, so that it would send you out and you'd be able to write, shoot, direct, edit, everything you might need to do to make your own movies, which in retrospect was a really great thing because here we are now. But they really seem to be gearing you towards independent cinema. You could walk in there and say how much you love, Scorsese or Michael Curtiz or Hitchcock or whoever else. And I'm sure with a lot of the professors at it might have had a little more weight, but they cut me some slack. And I had a Super 8 movie to show as well that I had shot in high
Oh,
school
cool.
that they were pleased with. And in fact, that short, which is called A Loner, is actually on the 16 Tongues Blu-ray.
Okay.
That's my first Super 8 movie on there. And looking back on it, I got to say, for a stupid little high school kid, I was like, yeah, I got some good shots in there, actually. It was surprised. I was not as embarrassed of it as I think some people could be about their first attempts out into the wading into the shores, off the shores and into the seas of cinema.
Not I don't want to make this too much about SUNY Purchase, but just to put this in context, I know for sure Hal Hartley and Abel Ferrara were from there. I'm sure
Abel, I'm
that
not so sure about, honestly. Hal was there just as I was there. Like we crisscrossed a little bit. Like I think he was graduated
yeah.
just as I got there. But yeah, we did some good. Nick Gomez was in my class, and he went on to do some independent stuff for a while. Tim McCann was not in my class, and he was there. and Elias Marriage, who went on to do Shadow the Vampire, Suspect Zero. Again, we were in one class together, which was experimental cinema, but we all knew each other. We were all, vying for time on the flatbeds to edit, being in the film building. So we all knew each other. We all would talk to each other or not talk to each other or insult
Yeah,
each other, depending. But it was mostly, for the most part, it was really very friendly. And these were all, as you might imagine, a very eclectic and very talented group of people.
sure. That's fascinating. What a cool history. So you get out in '88, and as what happens with, I don't know if this is your story, but as what happens with a lot of undergraduates degree, you're ready to go change the world. And what were those first few years like? Because you started making a movie in '92, right? So there's a few year gap there. Was there?
Right. Oh, well, I mean, it's interesting. I was more concerned with trying to find, PA work. I was just trying to, see if there was stuff I could do in the film industry and just to get more, to put more, knuckles in my belt, whatever that means.
Yeah,
I just made
yeah,
up a
yeah.
word. But just trying to get more experience, and it ended up that. It was difficult sometimes finding PA work on a regular basis. And I discovered that what I like is having regular work because that way, for me, it was easier to write and do my own stuff
Yeah,
than otherwise I was running around worried about can I get a job doing this for a few days and over
right.
there for a few days. And then when you did get PA work, it paid well. But they were long 12-hour days and some, maybe with 6 days a week. So again, didn't do much. I ended up working at a place that was a still photo repair and rental
Okay.
with a built-in, they had like studio spaces as well. So it was kind of neat. And I was there probably for a year or two, I would think. And then one day I just got a phone call from my friend Dan Millette, who's a production designer, a director, a writer as well. One of my friends from college, still one of my friends. He did the production design on Black Eyed Susan. I mean, we're
Oh, wow.
I love them. We're like brothers. I love this guy. I'm still friends with so many of the people I went to school with. It's astounding and wonderful. And he was like, "Yeah, I'm working in the art department for Basket Case 2 for Frank Henenlotter." And he said, he called me on a Friday. And he said, "Could you start Monday? Because this seems like something you'd want to do." So that was a Friday noon phone call. I marched into my boss's office. I think 15 minutes later, said, "I'm really sorry. This is my last day." And I felt really bad about that. I did,
Yeah, sure.
I would love to have given 2 weeks notice, but I was like, you just can't. What are you
This
going to
is
do?
happening. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, it's happening. Got to go do it. So then I, took that job, and then I had a great time. Met a lot of nice people, wonderful people on that as well. And then I came out of that and was once again like, do I find a regular job now, or do I try to find more PA work? And I got presented with an offer to work at a place called CTL Electronics, which was an industrial video repair, rental facility, and also they had an editing room there.
Okay.
And there's a long history behind them. Like the guy who's named after Chi-Tien Louis, um, had been in the video business since video began, basically.
Oh, wow.
Like he started that store when they invented Portapacks and separate cameras. So we were talking about like the 1960s, before people even were talking about, well, what's video, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
What
yeah,
is it?
yeah.
So he was way ahead of the curve. And it was because I went to work there that eventually I was able to have access to the equipment that I would make Shatter Dead with.
Wow. That's
So
awesome.
you just really never know these kind of weird paths you're going to take and end up doing something. And I mean, it turned out to be, just one of the best possible random things that could have happened to me, all these various things that led up to that.
Right. And that's a really interesting that's a perfect segue into Shattered Dead because you mentioned one of your three films that influenced you the most as an 18-year-old was Dawn of the Dead. And first thing you come out of the gate with is a zombie movie, of sorts, right?
Yeah, that's in quotes, air quotes, everybody, zombie.
But this is a theme that I want to bring up now, and maybe we'll talk about it as we go through these films because, you know, I love watching Shatter Dead because within the first, I don't know exactly when it's revealed that, zombies. Well, let's set it up quickly. So there are zombies and humans living together. The zombies do not, they're not this like bloodthirsty, ravenous bunch of like killers. They're just sort of soulless and like living without feeling and without a soul. Like, or it's that's kind of how it's presented, at least, right?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, the soul's just trapped in the body, but the body is deteriorating. I've heard people refer to them as zombie slackers, which I find funny. That's not
Yeah,
me. Someone else came up with that, but I was like, oh, interesting. Hmm.
true. Yeah, kind of. Um, and so immediately out of the gate, I was like, oh, this is a new spin on a zombie movie because it's so we there's certain tropes and like rules of a zombie film in a way, right, that you kind of
Yeah,
like look for. And I was like, oh, okay, well, let's see where he goes with this. So that really hooked me right away that I was like, okay, we're seeing a zombie movie, but like there's no rules here. Like, where is he gonna go with this? So can you walk me through like how much of the writing and the creating Shatter Dead was intentional to make your own path, and how much of it was just you saying it would be interesting if if they weren't, chomping on people's legs and like let's see where this goes. Like how is that like yeah.
that's funny. I mean, part of it comes from a paucity of funds. And I was thinking to myself, well, I really can't afford to do much in the way of makeup effects here. So, and yet I'd like to do something about the undead. So I had to find a way around that.
Okay.
And when I found a way around that, I guess, I'm trying to remember 30 years back here, but
Sure.
somewhere along the way, I must have thought, well, if they don't chew on people, that's less makeup budget for me. And that's good.
Uh,
And then from there, I think it probably just, I think for me, a lot of interesting creative stuff comes from desperation. Uh, the desperation of trying to find something new, and something affordable,
mm-hmm.
something interesting, because obviously you reach a point where you go, I've seen that before. Everyone's done that, but
Right.
whatever. But that's also part of it. It's like, what am I going to do? It's someone's handing it to me now. It's my turn to try something, and it'd be better if I could do something that really comes from, me, and how I'm thinking. And even if that part of me is just being a cheap bastard, that it's still me. So that's how you end up with, zombies running around and no, makeup effects for the most part in that movie. Um, and we had joked around at the time. I shot that with, um, as in, I mean, I directed it, I wrote it. It was shot by my friend Matt Howe
Okay.
from SUNY Purchase.
Oh, cool.
And he did a magnificent job. We shot that on Betacam. So we
Yeah.
had a good, that was one of the things I was like, look, if I'm going to shoot on video, I'm not going to shoot some piece of shit VHS camcorder. Let's get professional equipment. And the only reason that looks as good as it does now, for what it is for shot on video movie is that, yeah, we shot with, stuff that news crews were shooting with for
Okay.
networks. And also Matt did a fantastic job lighting it. He did because that's what he does. He's an excellent DP, amongst other things, also a great writer and a director. Like I said, everyone I talk about here as friends is probably going to have like a multi-hyphenate attached to them. Um, but yeah, we would joke at the time. I was like, I'm gonna try to make the sleaziest film ever made. So this is one of the rare instances where I started writing from the middle of the movie, wrote to the end, and then went back and did the beginning.
Oh,
And
interesting. Okay.
the joke, and I almost never do that. But the reason was here, the whole thing was inspired by, because I was talking to Matt and I said, fuck it, you know what? Every horror movie has a shower scene. I'm writing a shower scene. I'm gonna throw it in there and I'll see what I can do, anything new and interesting with it.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
And as soon as I started writing that scene, I was like, okay, so I guess if I have one come in as a zombie, well, they're not going to try to eat them. What's going to happen there? And then that built up and that built up, and then that goes to the scene where they're talking in the bedroom. So it was weird. So the whole mythology was being set up initially from that shower scene, into the next scene. And then, like I said, I got to the end, and then I was like, okay, now I just got to go back to the beginning and put in some setup. So we have like all the
Okay.
zombie cliches up front, and then when it reaches a certain point, it'll kind of slack off a bit and turn into what the movie's really about.
Oh, yeah.
Better or worse, that the first 15 minutes, whatever, so it is. Um, but yeah, but that to me is a good example of an unusual, for me, an unusual way of working. starting from the middle and working forward and back. And I
You're
never do that now.
you're doing the anti-Nolan, the reverse Nolan. Uh,
How does he work?
well, I know I don't know, but you remember his early film was Memento.
Oh yeah, yeah.
He
Yeah.
shot it in
Hmm.
order and then chopped it up. So you did.
I'm sure every now and then I'm writing script notes on my arm as well because very, very forgetful.
Interesting. So the core of Shatter Dead is sort of a well, I don't know about the core, but there is a love story in it,
Yes.
right? And it's an interesting discussion. And this is another. There's two things you just said that I kind of want to bring up. Um, uh, the first one though is I think there's a lot of good discussion that happens in your after watching one of your movies. So, and the second one is world building, but we'll get to that more in probably all of them, but I especially want to talk about it in Saint Frankenstein because you build an entire universe in 17 minutes, which is just fascinating to me. But more of that in a second.
In a
Um,
single hotel room. And just to your point, it's like there's a lot of discussion afterwards. I'll say this: there's not as much discussion as there is during the fucking movie. Because in my movies, all people do is talk. I'm sorry. Go ahead. I just want to throw that out there.
have you like at a screening or something?
Every time I go, every time I'm sitting there, I'm looking at my watch. Are people getting up to leave yet? Whenever I go to, thankfully,
Well, let's stay on that for 1 second though. What do you think is the reason people leave? Is it because there's nudity in your films, like and open discussions of sex in your film?
I've been so lucky. I have seen so few walkouts on my movie.
Okay.
The last I had a screening in Philly not too long ago, for Black Eyed Susan, and during the opening scene, which and now you've seen it, you know what the opening scene is. It ended, the lights came up in the scene in the movie, and her two chairs flop right open. People got up and they just ran the fuck out of the theater. It's like, wow, 7 minutes. That's a new record. I hope they got their money back. I felt bad for them. I was going to actually run out after them. I'm so sorry and give them
Give
their
them
money
seven dollars.
myself. But I was all the way at the back. I couldn't get out fast enough. They ran.
Um, for those willing to sit through and just watch what's happening, though, there's always a depth to the characters and there's always an interesting discussion. So the one coming out of Shattered Dead that I thought was interesting was what happens if we just don't leave the planet? Like what happens if people die and they're just still here? Like that's kind of an interesting thought exercise, right? Like what do
Well,
you do
yeah.
with
I mean, you've reduced infinity to the finite because at that
right?
point, everyone eventually dies. No one gives birth anymore, and then people just dissolve into pustules as time wears on the body.
Right.
So it to some extent, it's a kind of crossing the existential finish line
Right.
for humanity. Because one thing that is not discussed in the movies, what about animals? Do animals still die,
Oh,
or do
true.
they, or do insects? I just didn't have the budget and the wherewithal, and I was like, "There's enough here for me to deal with." But if I have a
One thing at
sequel,
a time.
I mean, Shatter Dead, the animals, whatever. Because
Shattered.
if in fact, this is coming from an atheist, I think one of the most religious horror movies possible, which is Shatter Dead. It basically acknowledges there's a God. God came down and said, I'm doing this. We never meet him. God's the bad guy, but we never actually meet them.
Mhm.
I should say them. I don't want to gender God.
Uh-huh.
Uh, and that's what we're left with is it. So in that sense, it's like one of those Christian scare movies in a way, except it's got uh, gun fucking and shotgun abortions, really, or it's not even an abortion, I guess, but it's what do they call it?
Well, that was the
Cesarean,
other.
shotgun
That's the,
cesarean.
each one of your movies also does have something in there that, again, you can look at it as perverse, you can look at it as creative. But there's this question about how do you have sex with an undead lover, right?
I
And
think I answered that question
you presented a
in
solution.
the movie. Perhaps not in not in the way the politest way, but I thought in a very matter of fact. I mean, it works.
This is a question you might not think is fair, but I'm curious to hear your thoughts. Why are you not scared of the vagina? And I'm going to tell you why I'm asking that question. You have as a movie maker, as somebody who is producing content and movies, you just seem so comfortable with nudity. It's across all your films, they're just naked, and there's usually a reason. Like in certain movies, they just don't care because it's in Shatter Dead. They're just half of them are living, half of them are dead. And 16 Tongues, which we'll get to in a second, is because it's hot in the room, and they're just hot, so they're
Yeah.
naked, and you know, and
Plus,
um,
the whole environment itself is just geared towards nothing but explicit sexuality all over the walls, all over the screens. Yeah.
yeah, it's the world they're living in, right? Yeah, of course. In Saint Frankenstein, they're in a hotel room, literally there for sex. So there's a reason for it all. But I'm just curious, like, where I don't know if that's a fair question, but like, how are you so comfortable with not only nudity in general, but like presenting it and making it and just putting it out there?
Wow, I don't mind the question at all, but I have to tell you, I'm not sure I really have an answer. Just because I haven't. I mean, here's what's interesting. You always hear the horror stories. You always hear about like you know, from performers, and it's like, yeah, they showed up on set, and then they asked me to take my shirt off, and I was like, well, I'm not going to do that. We never discussed that beforehand, and and that's on the production, right? That's not on the performer. That's to me is like the writer or the director or whoever the producers are isn't just simply not communicating with the performers or possibly even lying to them, trying to
Mm,
trick them into and all of my scripts, it's very clearly stated, and when I've met to interview performers, with 16 Tongues, when Alice, who plays the third lead, the hacker,
mhm,
like, listen, you did a great read. I'd love to work with you. You're basically going to be naked for a week on set, so I need to make sure you're comfortable with that. And I mean fully naked. I mean, we're not going to give you a pair of panties. We're not going to, we're going to be shooting around. I'm not saying the camera is going to be up your skirt or anything, but it's things like that, and the same thing happened with Black Eyed Susan when hiring Yvonne, who does such a
mhm,
great job. I was like, Yvonne, we have a 9-day shoot. You're naked for 8 days. Are you okay with this?
mhm.
And Yvonne was fine with it. They had done plenty of nude modeling in their past, so they were comfortable. And so having it in the script, reiterating when you're doing rehearsals, reiterating when you're meeting with performers, and just letting them know you're on the level, that we're not trying to sneak something in here. I'm
Yeah,
always like, listen, if there's a discomfort, tell me what the discomfort is. Let's talk. Let's do this.
yeah.
I've been on set where I've had to make some changes here and there, minor little things where someone's like, I'm not sure I'm comfortable with that. Okay, well, let's find where the comfort is then, or where you're least uncomfortable, and we'll work from there.
Mhm.
And so I feel like being respectful and communicating and actually collaborating with someone is what leads to these kind of sets that are surprisingly happy. I mean, there's always some discomfort. The set's too hot. We're working too hard, but the people are not walking around going, "Oh fuck, I got to take my clothes off. Jesus, this
Right,
is
right,
not
right,
getting
right,
paid for. It's not part of the bargain." Blah
right.
blah blah. Even with Black Eyed Susan in the screenplay, on I think it was on page 3 or whatever, page 2 or 3, I have a paragraph in there saying, "Listen, I want you to know." As you read the script, I'm writing out everything in detail as to what's happening because I don't feel like writing around it. That kind of bullshit. Keep in mind, we are not shooting an adult, porno here. We're shooting something that's going to be a hard R or an NC-17. So obviously, we're not going to be shooting hard cocks going into pussies, and you're not going to see the blow job from,
Yeah,
the side.
yeah.
But be aware, I'm writing it in as if that is there because we're all adults here, and it's just easier to do it that way.
There's that shows, I think, a lot about your professionalism from a writing perspective and from just an audience perspective. I think it does something. It did something to my psyche when I was watching the movies, and especially seeing them all close together, where I think it kind of I think it had this effect on me of sort of desensitizing me a little bit to the fact that they're naked and
Mhm.
just letting me, my mind went to a place of just wanting to more understand the world around them. Because one thing I think you do very well in all the movies even though there's a lot of sexual content and there's nudity and there's all these things, there, it's never the point. Like there's always something, I don't know if you want to say larger going on, or there's something else going on around them, and they're interacting within these rules that you set up for the world. But it's never the point is to just be provocative. I don't know if you intended it that way, but I never got the impression you were just trying to push a button. It really did feel as part of the story.
No, thank you. I mean, I feel like that kind of becoming desensitized to the nakedness. You look at the history of of art, it goes back, you go back to, the Olympics, the athletes were naked, there was an appreciation for the
Right.
human form, right? All through history. You look at, even Michelangelo, you look at the Sistine Chapel, there's, all these naked people running around,
Mhm.
even though God's watching, right? So,
Uh-huh.
um, the body should be nothing to be ashamed of. And I think, sometimes you're watching a movie and you think, oh, here comes the naked scene. Here comes the nude scene. Well, guess what? Yeah, that doesn't work with my stuff because,
Uh-huh.
the second someone starts taking their clothes off, like, oh, cool, they took their clothes off. Oh, they're still off. Are they going to put them back on? Jesus. Here's the credits. Were they really like what? How much was so once you start to not notice it,
Yeah.
uh, I feel like, mission accomplished, to some extent because they can still people, we have conversations at home, we might not be fully clothed, it's also, people, this is what people are like, You don't have to put on your best suit to have a sophisticated discussion about existential angst or something, right? Sometimes it can happen when you're sitting on a toilet or you're in the bedroom or wherever else, right? There's so many and I feel like that kind of rawness, that nakedness, in some way opens a viewer up a little bit to put up with people talking more, if that makes sense.
Oh, okay.
You
Interesting.
know what I
Yeah.
mean? I feel like you kind of go, well, all right, they're saying a lot of shit, but at least they're naked. That's cool. So I feel like I
Yeah.
think it really is helpful sometimes. I know that sounds crazy, but
No, no.
it's not wrong.
Well, I'm gonna say you're probably onto something, but there's something more. So if we talk about 16 tongues for a second, um, as I was watching that, I was thinking, man, Ridley Scott could have directed this. Like from the perspective, now, I don't know if he would have gone as to the level, to the extremes that you went through
Well, if
in
he did, he
terms.
would have made it stupider. Jesus. Those
That's true.
fucking cuts of Blade Runner he's done since then. Yeah, he's a fucking android. Fuck you, Ridley Scott. Fuck you.
He has not aged well. That's true. Even I'm nervous to go see the new Gladiator movie, um, um, but you do on who knows? I mean, are you open to talking what the budget was for 16 tongues? I'm
Oh, I'll
assuming.
tell you about the budget or anything. Yeah, no, that's no big deal. 16 Tongues was, if I remember correctly, somewhere between 15 and 20K. And that included buying the camcorder, buying the computer we edited on. So in terms of what we had to actually put towards production, I'm not sure we had more than much 10 or 15 at most. Shatter Dead was no more than five. And I'd have to really go back. It might have only been, and I was because I was, getting bargain rates on the edits and whatnot
Sure.
there. At that point in time, if I'd been charged, the going rate, it would have been a considerable about more than what it
Interesting.
did cost.
I mean, I really do. I would really challenge, in my mind, I would challenge people to start with 16 tongues if they were going to dip into your into your photography, or I guess movieography. Um,
Ouvroir,
your oeuvre.
ouvroir.
Because that looks like $1 million movie. Really, like,
Oh, thanks.
I don't know. I guess it's just lighting and set design, but the world you created and instantly just threw people into this world. It's like a mix between a Cronenberg and a Ridley Scott in terms of aesthetic. It just feels like, okay, this is a future world. We're definitely on a sex planet of some sort or some kind of a sex world where that's like why you go there. Uh,
Mhm.
and the characters are distinct. There's three main characters, right? They're all distinct, and there is a lot of talking. You're right, but there's not a lot of wasted words. There's also silence at times, and it's clear. I think that what's happened. Like um, I really love the way that you, first of all, just visually create this world. and secondly, put these characters in it that are all kind of intertwined, and then actually intertwine them in a way that's compelling as well. It's truly a wonderful piece of movie making.
Thank you. I'm particularly happy with it, so I'm glad to hear that. So many people prefer Shatter Dead. And one was like, really? You should watch Tongues. I love Shatter Dead. Oh, have you seen Tongues? No.
Uh,
Well, give that one a shot. It's got more going on, and it's more that. By the way, that's also that world building you're talking about is production designer Dan Willett again,
okay.
who the wallpaper. Jesus, just that wallpaper alone is like.
It's
I
amazing.
mean, it's kind of mind when he showed me that for the first time. I was like, "Yep, yep, that's good. Oh, yep, we're good." Yeah,
Do, what was if people are going into it, what I took from 16 Tongues was um, as technology improves, we have to be, because especially with the character of the hacker, I think the human characteristics never change. So you had jealousy, you had curiosity, you had these very human characteristics, but she used technology in a way that caused her physical pain, like quite a lot of physical pain, and she was not able to separate the physical pain from that desire to feel like controlling a little bit of what was going on, right?
mhm.
And then she wasn't even necessarily, well, I don't know if you, I guess there's three main characters essentially. I wouldn't say
Yeah.
one main or minor character, but
And I think they're all, equally.
yeah, no, I think you're right. So for her, I thought there was kind of this interesting discussion around technology and how technology can improve, but we're somewhat still human. At the end of the
Yeah,
day, still have these
yeah.
same stupid desires and impulses. And
The
then
tools get more precise. We don't. We seem to be getting dumber as the tools get more precise. It's kind of like an opposite reaction in some ways.
that's an interesting insight. Yeah, you're exactly right. And then the character of the assassin, I'm going to call her an assassin. Is that right?
Yeah, technically, yeah, the Ginny character, right?
Jenny Cracker, yeah. So she's an interesting one because she should be when you think of an assassin again, kind of in storytelling, emotionally cold, unavailable, right? Very precise in their decision making, and she definitely lets her emotions get in the way. So she's a well-written, interesting character with nuance there. And then you've got the cop who literally has 16 tongues sewn onto scars,
Hmm.
and he's a very scarred individual. So this film presented, I think, a lot of really interesting discussion when they were together around what happens if you have tongues sewn onto your body and do you hear their voices? And I'm just, I guess the question behind me rambling here is, first of all, just very impressed with the movie. But the question is, like, as you're sitting down to write these out, can you walk through a little bit of just so on Shatter Dead, you said he started in the middle and the story just kind of filled in.
Right.
This one did feel a little bit more intentional, kind of or a little bit more like beginning to end, I guess. Is that fair? Is this more of a,
Yeah, yeah, I would agree because I feel like Shatter Dead feels bifurcated in that way. It feels
okay.
like there's an opening 15, 20 minutes and then there's another movie kind of like it's led into, right? And it follows its own
Right,
course
right, right.
a little bit. So, and I feel like, yeah, but I feel like Tongues is a piece. It's a piece of what we're not sure, but it's a solid, more solid piece. Um, I will tell you that in terms of the creative process, the whole thing began with me being in the kitchen one day doing the dishes, and I had music playing in the other room, and I was listening to, I believe it was the Platters' Greatest Hits, and the song 16 Tons came on. And
Okay.
as I'm doing dishes and whatnot in the kitchen, I turned for a moment. I was like, that can't be what I'm hearing, right? And I remember going into the next room, and it's like, oh, it's 16 tons, not 16 tongues. Okay, putting it down and going like, that's a ring to it,
Oh, that's interesting. Okay.
a ring to it. And then from there going, what has 16 tongues? What would that be?
Uh-huh.
And that is what eventually something that silly, that little mistake is again, it's one of those lateral thinking exercises where it's like instead of trying to uh figure out things logically sometimes. You're just the opposite. You just kind of like free associate and come up with stuff. And then it's like, all right, so it's a guy covered in tongue meat. And as to where I came up with an assassin who's got clitorises implanted under their eyelids, you know, that I wish I had something for you on that one. But that was probably just some drunken ranting. It was like, well, if I got a guy with 16 tongues on him, well, who the hell could he possibly be palling around with? Like, all right, sure, why not? Someone with clits on their lids. All right, sure, yeah, why not? And then, things just flowed from there. And I remember writing it actually fairly quickly, relatively speaking, what is fairly quickly when you're writing a screenplay. I certainly within a few months to a year, I had a draft,
Yeah.
probably more likely a few months. And then was because once you get the draft going, then you just start going in and, you know, fixing what's broken. But you
Right.
want that first complete, 80, 100 pages down and whatnot. And I'd have to ask Alex, my friend, my bestest buddy Alex produced that, and he's the one who also produced Saint Frankenstein. And I remember him like I would just meet him I think once a week and hand him like 10 or 12 pages back in the day, when I was
Okay.
writing and then I would print out pages and instead of because the internet wasn't such a thing back then,
Right.
much. So I was writing about the internet on some way before there was internet. It was as popular as it was now, which is why I have her plugging into the electric socket of a wall
Right.
instead of having a dedicated port in the hotel room for
Huh.
internet, right? Is the way you would have it now. Although at the time, I remember reading that, like, yeah, you could set internet signal through AC um, outlets, which is what had inspired that. And I was like, oh, okay. So if you could find a way to filter out the 120 cycles, you'd find information still in there.
Oh
Uh,
yeah. Okay.
Eddie suddenly here. But yeah, I mean, I don't know if that's still the case. Yeah.
I love that though. Um, do you do a lot of research for the scripts?
I tried to.
Yeah, it
He
does
said,
show.
taking a drink of his bourbon. Bergen. It's Bergen. The young boy asked for Bergen. Um, yeah, I mean, I always try to do some research whenever I can. It's part of it is because you get an idea and you think, does that really exist? And if it does really exist, I need to know some of the particulars. And if it does already exist, then maybe I need to go to the next level with it.
Hmm.
Because then maybe it's not as interesting, and maybe there's so let me see what doesn't exist now, and then try to improve upon or in some way change the idea a little bit. So that's fairly common for me. I because the thing I hate the most is when I see, especially now, the modern science fiction movies, and I won't pick on any in particular, besides Alien Romulus, which I just happened to watch the other night. And the science is just so insultingly stupid.
Mm.
Whatever else might be wrong with the movie. And I was just sitting there going like, you've got to be fucking kidding me. This is supposed to be taking 200 years in the future, and you can't even figure out how fucking things work now.
Mm.
So that guy just gave himself an OS upgrade with a disc that you put in his neck. And you think that removing the disc is going to take away the OS upgrade? Do you even know how computers fucking work?
Oh yeah, that's a good point. That's a good point.
I'm just sitting there going, no, no. And it's that old joke. It's like, no, no, you being stupid has made me even stupider. Because I'm still sitting here watching when I should have just gotten up and walked out of the room. And there are a myriad of sins in that movie that are similar to that, but that was the one that was the most insultingly like. I mean, that's when I was at home. Oh, fuck you. As I will sometimes do when I'm watching movies that I hate or find insulting. Go fuck yourself. Are you fucking kidding? My poor missus has to hear me yell.
It'd be fun to hate watch a movie with you. Just yeah, Scooter McCrae hate watches something.
I got it. I try not to hate watch anything, so it's got to really push my buttons for me to do that.
Before we talk about, because I feel like in my head, your career sort of has like two, like almost like a halfway point. Although I don't mean to say that from a linear perspective, but
Half-life.
I have I feel that Saint Frankenstein and Black Eyed Susan are slightly just something slightly different.
Yeah.
Uh, but before we get into those, I'm curious, what movies do you watch when you want to relax? Like, what are those ones that really grab you, or are you somebody that always seeks something new? Like, how do you relax with movies?
It's as I get older, I've instituted something in my life the last couple of years called I call it Western Sunday. And
Okay.
that means every Sunday I watch a Western. I try to watch a new one whenever I can. And then sometimes I'll revisit favorites. And it began years ago with the love of Italian Westerns.
Yep.
And then accidentally stumbling across some classic Westerns and suddenly going like, oh, Randolph Scott, huh? Joel McCrae. Um, Seeing all these wonderful fucking movies. And it's always cross reference. It always starts like, oh well, Jacques Tournier directed this Western, and Joel McCrae is in it. And Bud Boddicker directed a Western with Randall Scott in it. And then from there, just kind of going, what else? Oh, Robert Wise directed this one with
Uh-huh.
listen to me, Robert. I just, geez, I've suddenly forgotten his name. Anyway, Robert Ryan's in this one, and anyway, so it's all been like a crisscross or spider's web of this stuff.
Yeah.
Eventually discovering my incredible love of older westerns. So, like I said, sometimes once a week, and sometimes I'll do one, sometimes I'll do two, and I'm still, in fact, I've just got today I got a notice I have a package in the mail coming with four Westerns I've never seen in it before. So they'll arrive. And I'm like, great, I got another a month of new Westerns ahead of me once they get here. So that's
That's,
a great way to start 2025.
I would
Uh,
love to see a futuristic Western from you, by the way.
what's that?
I would love to see a Western through your eyes, by the way.
Oh, I mean, the thing that I love about Westerns and you've seen my stuff. I think you'll appreciate this as to why I appreciate it. I mean, is that the best of them, the good ones are all morality plays.
Right.
The action scenes where I usually my mentally am checking out, the gunfight, okay, that's cool. I want to hear these guys talk. I want to hear them say what's on their mind and what the decisions they make and the situations that they're in. Everyone has this really simplistic view of it. Oh, it's cowboys and Indians and insulting this and that. I'm like, yeah, they're out there. They're out there. Just like every genre, Sturgeon's law is 90% of everything is crap. No genre escapes that. And Westerns are right there. There's a lot of garbage, but the good stuff is great, and it's also a great way to see what was on the minds of the people who were making them in the era in which they were made.
Right.
Like all things, all eras, how things change in terms of morality, and ethics, fashion, and just the way things are shot and presented. So you can really learn a lot, not just about the history of cinema when you're going from a Western that was made from, let's say, 1940 to 1973 or something, or 72, in that range. It's it's very instructional, and it's also, besides being relaxing, it's fulfilling, truly fulfilling. And I love most all genres of movies. Yeah, I'll sit around and watch a musical or I'll watch a science fiction film. Most of my science fiction films are pre 1988 or 90. I feel
Yeah.
like it's really the cream for me. And I mean, anywhere from about 1950 to 1976 is the sweet spot for me. Anything in there is like fair game, and I'm sure I love it, especially if it's the avant-garde crazy stuff. Uh,
Uh-huh.
but yeah, so that's me relaxing watching movies. It could be just about anything from anywhere.
I love that. The way you describe Western makes me think of about a year ago, give or take, we watched five Otsu movies close together.
Uh-huh.
It's interesting about that guy. I hadn't seen a lot of, Yasujiro Otsu's movies before, but
Hmm.
I always felt like they were going to be impenetrable because he's spoken of as this very, esteemed director or whatever. But
Hmm.
he essentially tells the same story five times, but the thing that changes is the world around the story. So you get to see these new costumes, you get to see the issues that Japanese people are dealing with at 1945 versus 1950 versus 1960. Like
Right.
the story's almost exactly the same. So it's like a known story about this kid not wanting to leave their parent alone, so they choose not to get married, and they're just kind of going back and forth with this topic. Um, but the world changes around them, and I found that very relaxing as well. You just kind of get caught up in like these little subtle nuance, these little subtle differences in.
Right. Mhm. Exactly. No, seriously, it's amazing how it's you could, because a couple of Westerns I've seen where like there's some of them are practically Shakespeare adaptations, but
Interesting.
they've been taken in the Old West and it works. and it works extremely well sometimes.
What's one Western we should watch if we haven't seen it yet? Not to put you on the spot. What's one that comes to mind for you?
I will tell you the Western that fucking destroyed me. Every time I've watched it a few times, I've shown it to other people now. One that was never on my radar is a Randall Scott one called Comanche Station.
Okay.
And like all great Westerns of that era, 75 minutes long. You know, I don't think I've seen a Randall Scott Western that was over 85
Right.
minutes. You
Right.
know, and they never feel rushed. Comanche Station just emotionally destroyed me, and I love it. And I just watched another one I've been recommending to people lately is another one called Fort Massacre.
Okay.
Joel McCrae, Forrest Tucker. And the thing that was interesting about this one is that I was watching it and the dialogue was so un-Western. I was
Huh.
watching, this feels like I'm watching a noir or something, uh,
Interesting.
more than a Western. It ended, and I checked the credits, and it was written by this guy, Martin Goldsmith, who had written the classic noir Detour.
Of course.
And the people in this Western talk like the people in Detour.
Detour's
Uh,
amazing
w-
too.
and so I felt I just love that. And I just saw like someone just showed me randomly something called Showdown in San Diego, I think it was called. And we were 10 minutes into the movie, and I was like, wait a minute. This is written by Martin Goldsmith. And it turned out that it was, because it was the same type of hard-boiled dialogue coming out of the cowboy mouths. And is it real? No, not even close. But is noir dialogue real? No, but it's that great kind of street poetry, or in the
Wow.
case of the Westerns now, like desert poetry. But it's
Yeah, yeah,
great.
yeah, yeah.
That and White Buffalo, which is like people, aliens from another planet are talking in White Buffalo. The dialogue in that is spectacular. Sorry, you got me off on a tangent. Yeah, I'll go
I
on.
love it. No, I'm taking note of all this. I'm gonna try to watch them all. I think the only other thing I'll just say about those is they're both available from Saturn's Core, and I think I would,
Thank you.
for those people that like to stream, are they streaming anywhere?
They are not.
Okay.
They are both a little too explicit to be streamed.
Okay. I mean, yeah,
They
I know
are.
that the guy from Massacre Video had an issue where just finding a streaming platform because of some of the stuff he was trying to put out. Like Netflix doesn't want to host Tumbling Doll of Flesh. Not that I'm comparing your film to that.
No, 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 I totally get, but I mean, yeah, but I mean, there technically is hardcore in both of them,
Right.
and that crosses the line for streaming.
Interesting. Okay, fair enough.
Um,
So I would strongly, strongly encourage people to go to Saturn's Core on either OCN distribution or maybe Saturn's Core directly. I don't know, but buy the movies because they're great and they
Thank you
need.
for your support, and I'm going to say the same thing. If you're listening to this now, go out and buy multiple copies of everything I've ever made. Please help me. I need to retire at some point.
That's right. Let's see if we can get the sales up. Now, movies that aren't out on disc yet, although Black Eyed Susan is officially out now. I don't have it yet. But you have a short film that was part of a project that struggled to find the light of day in its
Yeah,
entirety, which is called Young Frankenstein, Saint Frankenstein.
Young
Different.
Saint Frankenstein will be the sequel. It'll be the child of.
Young Saint Frankenstein was in the end of Black Eyed Susan, uh,
Yeah, yeah,
which
it's funny.
teaser for when we get into that. But
Yeah.
um, I, Saint Frankenstein is a short film, and it's on Vimeo, right?
It is on Vimeo for free. In fact, if you just go on the internet and www.saintfrankenstein.com, takes you right to it, available to watch. It is also on the Black Eyed Susan disc,
Oh,
and it is also on the excuse me, the 16 Tongues disc,
perfect.
because why not? I own it. I'd rather people, what am I going to withhold it? People watch it. I think it's a good movie. It's got a Fabio Frizzi score. It's beautiful looking, blah, blah, blah. I want as many people to see it as possible. There's no way to monetize it at this point. It's a simple lost finance wise, it's lost to the wind.
Well, I'm gonna challenge what you said only on one thing. It's a great short film because
Thank you.
in 17 minutes you create an entire lore that links vampires with the Nazis and Dr. Frankenstein with basically like a freedom fighter and Frankenstein's monster as a freedom fighter. Um, this short film, I wish it was a full-length movie. This movie is awesome.
Thank you. So do I. I wish it was a feature too. Trust me.
Yeah. I hope you get the ability to see that into if you have a script for it. I hope you get to find financing for that because like you, there is a lot that you unpack in those 17 minutes. There's a ton packed in there.
Thanks. Well, let me tell you something. There's a lot more. There's a lot more. There's an entire universe of shit that happens. That was a idea I've had in my head for at least 10, 20 years, the Saint Frankenstein story. And I was, just approached to do a short, and I was like, well, what can I do? Can I condense this down into something? And I was like, yeah, well, I can condense it down if instead of actually showing what the fuck this it is, there's two people in a hotel room talking about it. So I says, what can I do to brighten this up? I know of two naked people sitting in a hotel room talking about it. And you playing to what I was saying earlier, people will now sit through people talking more readily this way. And the fact that it's two fantastically beautiful performers as well. I mean, Melanie Gaidos and Tina Kraus. I mean, they could have sat there for hours just talking naked, and you'd be like, okay, sure, I'm listening.
Um, the women in this are beautiful, stunning. Who plays the vampire? What's the name of the actress that plays the
That's
vampire?
Tina.
Tina?
Yeah.
She looks a little bit like Monica Bellucci. Um,
Hmm.
just in at least in her body. Just
Sure. I'm gonna reverse that. I'm gonna say, you know what? Monica Bellucci looks like Tina
there
Kraus.
you go. There you go. But um, but the thing that jumped out to me about Saint Frankenstein is the special effects kind of makeup job you did with Frankenstein's monsters. Fantastic. Like it
That
looks
was
like
Gerner and Spears.
who is that? What's the name?
Gerner and Spears,
Okay.
Brian Spears and Pete Gerner, I believe. And they do a lot of stuff. They're great. They do a lot of work with Larry Fessenden, I believe, as well. They're still so there's that connection there too. And yeah, they did a really in fact the design like that chest scar, that
Yeah.
scar you get when you're doing checking out a dead body. I've lost my words here suddenly. But that was something that Dan Villette had also designed as well. So he had come up with this design, and then they added their stuff to it as well, and then that's how the makeup came about.
Wow. It's excellent. I find myself constantly in awe of the fact that you don't have like a Hollywood budget when as I'm watching these things. And that's another good example. Was that shot on video or film?
That was shot on digitally. I believe we shot in 5K with a red.
Wow.
And we shot it in 2 days. And I think it was about 15, just under 15,000 for the entire budget. So I'm not sure what our actual production budget was in there, but we probably had like 12 to shoot with. And then we still had the scoring, editing, and whatever else. And we were, scrambling trying to get the bargain rates we could from friends and family and people, it's one thing we've also been very lucky on too, which is that people like the stories, the scripts, and they see the performers and they see that we're doing the best that we can. And people tend to go, okay, I'll bring my rate down a little bit because it actually looks like something interesting that I'd want to
Wow.
work on. So we've been very, very lucky on so many of these gigs.
That's amazing. Speaking of very lucky, how did you meet Fabio Frizzi for the first time? How did you get that relationship? And because he did not only Saint Frankenstein, but he did Black Eyed Susan as well.
Yeah, yeah, and I love them both, and of course I love the Maestro. The short version is we met because 10 years ago or so, or maybe 12 years ago, I was doing some blog writing for a site called Film Score Monthly, and I discovered, oh look, it's the birthday of Fabio Frizzi, and I feel like on that site they never really give composers who like Italian composers doing genre movies as much love as John Williams and Bernard Herrmann and Jerry Goldsmith. By the way, I love all these guys too, and I'm fine, more power to them. But you always hear like, oh, that's a synthesizer score from someone did in Europe, real cheap, blah blah blah, whatever. I'm like, oh fuck you.
Yeah.
So I wrote it and I posted it there, and I don't know what happened. I was on Facebook not long after. And I was like, yeah, I wonder if Fabio Frizzi's on Facebook. I found him. I was like, well, shit, let me just send him a link to what I wrote about him. And and I guess it turned out, it was just around his birthday because I was writing about it because it was his birthday and he got it. And he was like, oh my God, this is really lovely. Thank you so much. It's just bizarre coincidence. I'm going to be coming to New York in about 2 weeks or something. You want to meet up?
Wow.
I mean, how fucking crazy is that, right?
Best.
So I thought about it.
You're right.
Want to meet up? I know. Oh, okay,
Sure.
sure.
Right.
So yeah, so I met up with him again. My bestest buddy Alex and producer Alex. We met up with the maestro and his wife and his kids, and we took them to. We said, "Oh, we want to go somewhere nice with you." And he's like, or he'd say, "Take me somewhere like New York." I said, "We'll take you to Chinatown. You want to go to Wohop in Chinatown?" He's like, "Wohop? I've heard of this place. Yes, let us go." So, so there was like eight of us there, whatever. And if you've ever been to Wohop or know of Wohop, it was eight people and it came out to like dinner for everyone for like, $25. And, which food is great and it's relatively inexpensive. And then
Yeah.
we became friends then. And we stayed in touch. And then suddenly I was like, oh, 2 or 3 years later, like out of nowhere, I'm making this short, Saint Frankenstein. I was like, gee, it would be kind of amazing if maybe the maestro could score this. So sent him the script, got in touch. He loved the script. He saw the footage. He loved the footage. And he was like, he had a hole in his schedule. He was so busy. And he said, I think he had like a 2 or 3 week hole in his schedule. He said, okay, I'm going to do it right here in this. And he said, the thing is, though, we're not going to have much time to do any back and forth. I'm just going to do some music for you. And I was like, that's fine. I'm absolutely, that's fantastic.
Sure, yeah.
And then we got it, and I was just kind of like, "Are you fucking kidding me? This was your like little quickie squeeze out between bigger gigs, really? Such a
Amazing.
gorgeous, gorgeous score." And so yeah, we could not have been more lucky.
Wow.
Sketch, and of course, we remain friends to this day. Blah blah blah, and see him when he comes to tour in New York. I just saw him when we were in Helsinki 2 weeks ago because we went through Rome. So we went to dinner and hung out and got to see doing some rehearsals in the studio. And then, of course, there was the Black Eyed Susan project, which was one where we actually got really to collaborate in a real director composer manner
Wow.
more extensively.
How was he day to day like that? I mean, it must be so amazing to sit there just across somebody so talented.
Well, yeah, keep in mind we're doing it long distance, you
Sure,
know.
sure, sure. That's true.
So I wish I could have been there. It would have made things easier, because you're going back and forth sometimes. So, but the thing is, we have a really great musical language back and forth because I do understand music. I do understand how to describe music in a way that a musician understands what I want or what I'm interested in or what's,
Okay.
'cause you have to find words that are going to evoke a mood. And sometimes you can say, I want it like this, but can it be on a guitar instead of a piano? And so you can get specific there like that, going back and forth. Because sometimes initially the maestro would send me a sketch where it was done on a piano. And I was like, that's beautiful, but can you do it as a guitar instead? Because I know you have a great guitar player and it'll be different. And the piano is too rich. We need something a little more
Okay,
thinner
okay.
sounding. That's why the guitar will have that. It won't take up the entire audio space.
Yeah.
You also want to leave room for the voices. And he was like, "Oh yeah, yeah, yeah." And he knows this stuff too. Obviously, he might have even been planning. He might have just been like, "Oh, I'll send it this way," but I know it's going to be a guitar. Let's see what's.
You never know. That's
We
true.
always go back and forth on this stuff, but it was just an excellent collaboration, and the score is for Black Eyed Susan is
Oh, it's haunting and beautiful. Um, but that's kind of brings me to the movie in general, though, because so I want to go back 11 years, and I want to set the context for people because it's a
I
movie.
don't. Okay.
Not a good year for you. Um,
Yeah.
2013, there's a movie that came out called Her, which was a large budget sort of Hollywood creative mind and a fairly creative film that took a look at where we're going with AI, right? Sort of,
I've heard of it and heard good things about it, but I've never actually seen it. Yeah.
I, I I'm
Worth
not,
seeing?
yeah, it's okay. It's
Oh,
interesting.
okay.
It's a Yeah, I think it's an interesting film. But there's something that I think is interest. This speaks to me about your work in general, and I want to also say it about Black Eyed Susan, because there have been warnings about AI in the news. You know, Andrew Yang ran against AI.
Mhm.
There's there's some discussion generally in the general consciousness about AI. Just like in the same way, there were zombie films before Shatter Dead, and there were sci-fi movies before 16 Tongues. But I think what I love about your filmmaking, so the movie making so much, and what I love about the way that I I feel that not that I claim to understand your brain, but I sort of am starting to get a sense for what's, what makes you tick is I think it just feels to me like you're always looking to go one step further and sort of push an idea or challenge an idea or make people think a little bit, right? And I can't remember if we said this before we recorded, if we said this on air, but I want to make sure we say it now. You make movies for adults. And I really love that about your movies. And I think Black Eyed Susan is such a fantastic example of this. Like, this is a movie, it's not an adult movie, although it's about sex dolls. It's not a
Mhm.
porno.
Right, right.
But this is a movie for adults, and you are forced, as an audience member, you are forced to wrestle with this idea of what are the physical and emotional limits you can push if it's not a sentient being, but it acts like one.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think someone under 21 is going to get as much out of this movie as someone who's in, 35 and up, right?
Yeah,
So in that sense, I agree. It's adult. I mean, it's one that asks you to have lived life a little bit so you
yeah,
can understand, desperate living for someone who's trying to provide for their family, for themselves, and what decisions they need to make. Hopefully responsible decisions. But then, every now and then you have to make a decision that you're kind of like, well, I guess I'm not sure this is the right decision yet, but I'm gonna have to make it and then find out later. And hopefully made the right decision. Um, but I'm sorry, I just realized, were you, did I jump in too soon? Were you gonna,
no,
no,
no, no, no, no,
you
no.
frozen.
I'm just having that. You just triggered something else for me, so I'll just ask it since we stopped. Not only that, but also the thing that I'm so fascinated with the ideas presented in Black Eyed Susan is that it's very difficult for movie makers to talk about some taboo topics, right? So there's not a lot of movies out there that are about if you had a doll that you could abuse during sex, would you do it? Because you have these violent urges and you you're not hurting a person, you're hurting a robot designed to get hurt. So
Mhm.
does that make it okay? Like that's a fascinating concept. And I don't even want to get into the spoiler at the back end unless you're okay with it, because I don't know how many people you want to, talk about where the idea goes.
I'm going to say let's hold on that for now.
Yeah.
I mean, my feeling is it isn't even a spoiler if people are reading between the lines, but yeah, yeah, it's here's what's interesting because I've had a similar discussion with some other people, and it's the great philosophical debate. I mean, if you have a problem and you find a way to feed it in which no one else, in which people don't get hurt,
Mhm.
is that the way to go? Right?
Mhm.
Or is it better to punish someone for things that they do that are wrong? Or the third way around is basically something along the lines of, is it even something you can discuss to begin with, right?
Yeah.
Because there's some, I mean, the second you can't talk about something, it's over. You've lost the battle completely.
Yeah.
You want people to be able to talk about things in order to work them out, even if working it out is pushing it to the side and then coming back to it, right?
You mentioned earlier you're atheist. I grew up religious and I'm kind of somewhere in the middle now. I don't know exactly where I sit now, but one of the things that's pushed me away is religious fundamentalism
Hmm.
is essentially an exercise in repression
Yeah.
in practice. I'm not saying in belief, but in practice,
In practice, yeah.
it becomes an exercise in repression. And you see all this wacky shit coming out that people do because they're repressing their desires. And there's a reason that priests are so famous for doing all these horrible things. It's because they're not allowed to think about sex, but like
Mhm.
it's a pretty human thing to think about. So it's crazy to just like, limit that to just not even talking about it.
Yeah, I mean, that's where it gets a little difficult too, is like it's suppression versus repression. It's repression versus expression, right?
Yeah.
And trying to figure out which is actually works better, not just for the person who's acting out, but against the people who are being acted out
Sure.
by that person,
For
right?
the
And
receiver.
and there's no real there's no you can't not, one size does not fit all in this case, because there's so many variables involved. You really have to take everything on a case by case basis here. Um, so there are arguments being made for both. And I'm saying both in this case, but there's other directions to go as well. And I've said this before, and it's my bulletproof vest, which is the great thing about being. I'm using the A word. I don't normally use this word, but the great thing about being an artist is you can ask any questions you want, but you never have to actually answer them.
Oh, yeah.
And so that's a bit of an escape valve. So I'm the troublemaker who comes in and says, there's a lot of questions here that should be asked because you're avoiding this question, and that question. And then, well, oh, but really, well, what do you think? Got to go by. Hey, man, I'm just a delivery man. I'm just a delivery boy here. I'm just here to deliver the questions. I'm not here to cook the meal for you. So,
Yeah.
so in that sense, I feel like a little bit of a coward to some extent, for not coming out and saying, well, this is a definitive answer. But at the same time, I feel like art in general is not about providing answers,
Yeah.
but to going back to something you said earlier, but providing tools for
Yes.
people to find their own answers, right? Because you could look at something and say, well, this is how it went going this way. What could have been done differently? What would I have done differently? Any again, any number of variables are at play.
I hope I don't get these countries wrong. I'm 95% sure on both of them, but forgive me if I get the countries wrong. But Spain experimented with showing hardcore pornography after midnight for just on public access TV
Huh.
to try to reduce sex crimes, and it worked.
Uh, really?
And Portugal has experimented with legalizing or at least decriminalizing every drug. So yeah, heroin, whatever.
Uh-huh.
It's illegal to distribute it, and it's technically, I don't think it's legal to buy, but if you get caught, you just get sent to a clinic for rehabilitation. There's no jail time. Um,
See, anything that involves getting sent to a clinic for rehabilitation sounds like a lot better idea to me than throwing someone into a fucking pit. So yeah,
no,
already that's better.
it's much better. Yeah, the idea. That's a different discussion. We don't get me started on our
Yeah.
criminals because there's a whole nother 3 hours. But um, But there is this question that people have been wrestling with for years because they're trying to figure out how much do you suppress and how much do you push forward and like what happens either way, right? Around those.
You're so kind. For years, no, for centuries, for millennia, it's been the question. Everything you've just stated, you can go find in the Bible. Those are the Bible is basically the first draft version of dealing with all these questions and trying to find a solution. And sometimes it works more morally and ethically, and sometimes it doesn't work at all. And and then you get your Deus ex machina, God in the machine. So that's why Sodom and Gomorrah gets destroyed, but Abraham can fuck his daughters to have kids. You know, to be clear, just I had a religious period as well, so I'm not. I do have some recollection of going back to reading the Bible in Hebrew and translating it into English during my yeshiva years.
Nice. I think you just made me make a connection though that I haven't really made until you just were referencing historical text, Bible text, these things. I think that's what I like so much about the way you write and the way you think is that I think you do a very good job of attacking or discussing like core issues that I think are on a lot of people's minds. But maybe we're just difficult to find time. Like I can't remember the last time I just sat down and had a philosophical discussion. I'm like work is
It's
busy. I have a kid. Like it's just,
tough. It is tough.
yeah, exactly. And I think that's what's so refreshing to me about your films is I get to go back to a time when I had that time and I just get to sit with you for an hour and a half or whatever and like just sort of go in this mindset of wrestling with these things that are they're really fun to talk about. Like they're fascinating things to talk about.
They're refreshing. We all have this. There are sections of our brain that get the cobwebs, they get musty, because they're just not being engaged enough or
Yeah.
as much,
Yeah.
as they used to be. To your point, I would say that, each one of my movies is probably a college dorm room bullshit session, just waiting to happen or happened, and I'm going to use the C word here, and I apologize in advance, but capitalism is geared the worst aspects of capitalism, because there are some good aspects to capitalism, but the worst of them is geared towards keeping us working
Oh,
and
yeah.
trying not to think too much
Right.
about the kind of things you just mentioned. Because if you start thinking about those things, you start to see how the system can actually be dismantled in some ways or improved or
Improved, right?
number of things, right? And our masters don't want that. And that'll be hopefully as much of a political rant as I'll go on now as we draw towards near the conclusion of all this. But it is important to have those discussions. I think it's before we got on the air, and we were saying how like I'm very lucky in that I have so many wonderful friends who are also artists who do their own work. They're painting, they're writing, they're drawing, whatever it may be. And so whenever we get together, the discussion will always invariably lead to what are you working on? And then and the drinks start flowing, and it can go on for hours, just talking about how like either talking about a basic story and how it's developing to like what are the philosophical tenets of even trying to tell that story in the first place? Why is it attractive to you? Where is it going to go? How do you feel like it's healing you or hurting you? Things like that. And it's just so important. And here's the thing. You don't need to be an artist to be having these discussions with other people because, again, that's capitalism trying to convince you that, oh, you're a worker, you got a day job. I've got a day job. We all have day jobs,
Right.
and finding ways to engage in your own mind with yourself and with other people around you is made more difficult by the day job. Uh, so I'm not trying to vie the responsibility back to us, saying so we have to find our own time, but we unfortunately we kind of do a little bit to
Yeah.
get away from the sucking vortex of capitalism.
I mean, that's why I do this. I mean, I don't have any RTVF training, but I I just have to get an outlet. I have this mind that's just curious, and I have to write and I have to talk about movies. Otherwise, I just go crazy because it's just in my head otherwise. So, um, I think
We
that's a good
all
way. I think that's a nice place to end it, Scooter. I think you came through very well. I think people get a glimpse into how you think, what's important to you. Is there other than, this is available through the Vinegar Syndrome website. They help produce Black Eyed Susan.
Yep.
Um,
I mean, actually, technically everything is. Even the Saturn's core stuff is available also through the Linear Syndrome website. Although, unfortunately, they're down for December. I think only the affiliate labels are in
Saturn's
December.
Core stuff they could, yeah, you can still buy Saturn's Core through them. In
Okay,
this,
is the Saturn core is open for
yeah,
December?
yeah,
Okay,
yeah.
so figures. Yeah, my flagship movie. Yeah, see you in January. But yeah, the two older ones are available. And by the way, buy them, please. Hey,
I would strongly encourage people to do it. It's not gonna be a purchase you regret. It's the fantastic films or fantastic movies, and Scooter, I just really appreciate you taking the time out to sit here and chat about these, and it was really good to get to know you.
Thank you very much, Chris. I had a fantastic time. And if everyone just sitting around here and bullshit again for another 90 minutes about anything else, just let me know. We can talk about other movies, whatever. I'm fine, man.
All
Had
right.
a great
Well,
time.
good. Thank you, Scooter. Me too.
Thank you for listening. To hear more shows from the Someone's Favorite Productions podcast network, please select the link in the description.
I am Adam Lundy, the host of the Radiance Films podcast, a show that is dedicated to all things Radiance Films. Join me every month as myself and some varied and interesting guests sit down to discuss the latest releases and announcements from Radiance Films, now part of Someone's Favorite Productions podcast network.
If you're looking for more horror outside of the mainstream, look no further than Unsung Horrors, a podcast about underseen horror movies. I'm Lance.
And I'm Erica. Every other week, we'll cover a horror movie with fewer than 1,000 views on Letterboxd. We'll even give you double feature recommendations to pair with the movies we discuss.
From gothic to shot on video, from slashers to comedies, from giallo to J-horror, we'll cover all the subgenres. So join us as we unearth these hidden gems of horror.
Follow us on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook, all at Unsung Horrors, available wherever you listen to podcasts. And part of the Someone's Favorite Productions podcast network.